Welcome back to the channel, guys. I had a couple of requests. You guys wanted to learn more about the aluminum deck John Deere mowers. So I don't have one on hand at the moment, but specifically you wanted to know more about the commercial models. And so you're talking about the John Deere, that would be the JX85 in the green deck. I'll get to this in a minute. The JX85, and then in the commercial silver decks, you had the 14SX, the 14SC, which was either a zone start or a blade clutch model. And there was a 12PC, which that's what this is originally. That was a two cycle push version, which was the lightest version that they offered in any of these mowers. And it had no blade clutch, it had no transmission. It was just a 20-pound engine with an aluminum deck and aluminum wheels, very lightweight. And it's one of the mowers that when I first had this, they're extremely rare, but it's one of those that, like, it doesn't even need to be, you never think that it needed to be self-propelled because it's so incredibly light. And there's only a few mowers I can say that with where legitimately they don't need to be self-propelled because they're so light. So anyway, so in the commercial mowers, other than the engine, you had the Kawasaki FC150, which was the kind of the rectangle type of shroud on it. Kawasaki FC150, the early ones were made in Japan, and then in late 1989, they moved their production to Marysville, Missouri. So then they became assembled in USA. They were still Japanese parts assembled in USA until 2006, which of course these mowers were not being made anymore when production moved to China. And that's when the FJ180V took over. So other than the engines, the commercial versions, there were a couple differences. For starters, they had aluminum or steel wheels, and they were double ball bearing instead of a bushing and a ball bearing like on the yellow plastic wheels. They were supposed to be able to be serviceable. The tread on them was not replaceable, unlike the later models that John Deere made in the late 2010, the 2010, 20-aughts. They stopped producing these in around 2006 for the part. They stopped making the JX85 in 2001, and that was the end of it. So you basically had 5 years to stock up on spare parts. Other than that, you're basically at the mercy of trying to find used ones and being very careful with the ones you have. They are actual rubber, and so they dry out and crack, especially if they're in the mower that's stored outside in the sun. And I'm sure you've come across some of those you see on eBay. You can tell that they've been sitting because, like, the whole bottom third of the tire is starting to crack. But when you come across a set of these in good condition, they're expensive. They're like $120 to $150 is what a set of 4 of them go for on eBay. So very expensive. The rear wheels, instead of having a plastic drive gear against the wheels, they are steel. So you have a metal on metal transmission gear on a metal wheel. Again, heavier duty, longer life, and it's just commercial rated. So other than the wheels, you had on the adjusters, they had a stamped steel plate that reinforced where the adjusters are, because as a commercial model, you may be going several different yards a day that all use different heights. So it's getting used frequently. Well, if you didn't have that metal plate, it would actually just wear into the aluminum deck, which is cast aluminum and soft. And so then your adjusters would basically get ruined over time because of the deck. And there's no fixing the deck, you replace the deck. Those were actually available separately as a dealer upgrade. So you may come across mowers that are not commercial models that have these extra reinforcement plates, because again, it was an option at a dealer. Another thing with the wheels is the very backside of the dust shield or dirt cover, whatever you want to call it. They're actually stamped steel as well instead of plastic, so they don't flex. They do a better job at keeping the dust and dirt out of the gears, and I have found that is the case. I've had several of the commercial models, and they definitely, even though they've seen commercial use, they seem to hold up a whole lot better than the plastic versions do. So we had the wheels, the adjusters. Another thing that the commercial ones had is, if you look along the bottom of the deck, there are these stamped steel reinforcement pieces, because if you're mowing up against a house foundation or against a driveway or a sidewalk or flower bed or something, and it's constantly rubbing against the side, it's going to wear down that soft cast aluminum deck. And the early ones did not have it, and the easy way to tell if you have an early deck or not is there's these little nubs on the side of the deck, which is actually just a place for them to drill to hold the screws that hold in those reinforcement pieces. So I would say like the 89s didn't have it, the 90, 91 and on, those had it. Including the 12 PC. So I'll get into this particular mower in another video, because I fully restored this one, and it's kind of like a custom job as well. So I don't want to like confuse you, like, oh, how do I get this mower? Well, you can't, because this mower didn't really exist. I made it from other parts to make it the way I wanted it, and I use it. I don't just store it and make it look pretty. Another thing that you'll come across, and so I've had probably 100 of these mowers through the shop, either fixing people's, buying, selling, flipping, parting out, whatever. And I have yet to see this, but there is a steel reinforced deck liner that went underneath the deck that basically prevented, sand and dirt and debris from ruining the deck and wearing the deck out. So it would wear out a replaceable liner, and I'll show you on your screen here what that looks like, because it's still in the parts catalog, just hasn't been available for a long time. But I have yet to come across a mower that's had that. So I don't know if I don't believe they came with that from the factory, so it would have been like a dealer installed option or something like that. But I have yet to see one, and maybe they just all rusted out, or they got caught up in the blade and people just threw them out, and I really don't know. So anyway, the John Deere 14SX is the same as the green deck John Deere JX85 commercial mower. The only difference is it's green. The couple little things, like they went, instead of having the John Deere logo here on 2 pieces of plastic, it's then a sticker, probably cost savings, things like that. The early ones had chrome handlebars, and then they switched to black handlebars in April of 1993. And there's another difference that you'll see on JX85s. The early ones there were 2 different styles of fuel caps and shrouds. So the early ones had kind of a smaller, taller, ribbed type of fuel cap, and it actually sits at less of an angle than the newer style, which has kind of a flat, larger. And I don't know why they made the change, because there wasn't really anything that was failure prone to that. The fuel tanks weren't known to leak or anything like that. So I don't know why the change, other than the Snapper and some other brands used that engine as well, so they may have altered that design, so there's just one design for all of the mowers. I don't know, but that change happened in and around March or April of 1997. So if you look on the sticker that has a serial number and everything on the green deck mowers, it'll say DOM, which is date of manufacture. And so it's pretty self-explanatory, when it's made. But the JX85 was made from 1997 until 2001, but the green deck JX75 and the JE75, which is the non-commercials, those were made until around 2003, when the JX75 continued under a new deck with the Kawasaki FJ180 Chinese-made engine. I believe it was USA made for a while, onto Chinese. They didn't sell very well. They had some transmission issues that were known in those, but overall, still a decent mower. But I think there's a reason everybody still continues to come back to these 1989 to 2003 John Deere mowers, because they knocked it out of the park almost right away. Just fantastic mowers, and there's a cult following, if you will, but people that know what these are know them, and there's one heck of a market for them still. And, you know, as I'm, you know, somebody who buys, fixes, sells, flips, parts out, whatever, you know, it's just kind of a hobby. And there's no lack of demand. And I'm here in East Texas where, you know, you can mow almost year round, but there's always a demand for these mowers, and they made hundreds of thousands of them, which is fantastic. So parts availability is pretty decent. It's in the last couple of years, it's starting to get a little more difficult to source some parts other than, you know, your basic wheels and blades and spark plugs and coils. But anything else, you may have to look on eBay for a used part or something like that. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share about the commercial John Deere mowers. So thanks again for watching, guys. We'll see you soon.